The Courage to Lead, episode 22. Hey, Coach Harlan here. Welcome back to the podcast. Hope you guys are having a great week. I am having a phenomenal week, and I'm excited because I get to introduce you to a good friend of mine. Please welcome Marcel Henderson to the show. Marcel is an executive coach, consultant, and counselor, and a specialist in the field of psychology, leadership, and well-being. She has extensive experience working with individuals, couples, groups, and corporate teams to effect long-lasting change in behavior and effectiveness. Marcel is the founder and president of the C3 Group, a leadership and executive coaching and consulting firm. What is unique about Marcel is that she teaches on the new paradigm for leading in today's complex and ambiguous world using modern-day psychology, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom. Marcel, welcome to the show.
Hi, Harlan. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
That is awesome. I want to definitely dive into all this stuff, the psychology part of it and the ancient wisdom. That always intrigues me. So definitely get into some of those topics in just a while and learn more about the C3 group. But first, and you know what's coming, and my listeners know what's coming, I have 10 questions that I ask all of my guests. These were the questions made famous by James Lipton on his award-winning show, Inside the Actors Studio. So I have 10 questions to help the audience get to know you a little bit better. So if you're ready, I will ask you these questions.
Go right ahead, Harlan.
All right, Marcel, question number one. What is your favorite word?
I think I would say freedom.
Very good. What is your least favorite word?
Complacent.
And what turns you on?
I would have to say, particularly as an outcome of last year and COVID, was seeing how people took the unexpected and the most challenging circumstances and turning it into something that was either uplifting or revenue generating, but realizing just how innovative people can be when we're put under dire situations, and just how
Absolutely.
exciting it is to see people do that. So
Nice. Yeah. And last year was definitely a test of that.
for sure.
All right. Question number 4. What turns you off?
I guess the opposite of that, which would be like deficit thinking, that it can't be done, that it's not possible.
Good job. What sound or noise do you love?
Guess I would say laughter and chimes. I love the sound of chimes. Laughter for sure.
Okay. And what sound or noise do you hate?
Slurping.
Hmm.
I can't stand the sound of somebody slurping their cereal or their coffee. Yeah.
Good. All right. What is your favorite curse word?
I would say it rhymes with the word habit.
Okay.
Since we're not using any curse words here.
Exactly. All right. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Yeah. So I was thinking on this, knowing you're going to ask me this one, and I where I landed, Harlan, was there's nothing in this lifetime that I'm seeking to do now. But if there is reincarnation and I get to choose on a future life, I would love to come back as a creative and to either write lyrics or sing. I think the ability to connect with people through music is extremely powerful. I know it affects me in a powerful way. And so I just think to have that ability would be great. So you don't ask me to sing, okay?
Note to self. Do
Yeah.
not ask. Okay.
Songs for you, I'm sure.
All right. And what profession would you not like to do?
Oh gosh. I would never want to work in a prison. That's something I don't think I would ever want to do.
I don't even know if I want to visit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. And finally, Marcel, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome and well done.
Good job. Anything short of that would be concerning, I think. All right. And so we will be back with more questions for Marcel Henderson right after this. So stick with us. All right, and we are back. Marcel, again, thanks for agreeing to be a guest on the show. I've been looking forward to our conversations. Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get started in psychology?
Yeah. Well, I kind of got into it a little bit backwards, Harlan. What I mean by that is that I started out in business, and I spent 15 years in corporate America as a business leader. And it wasn't until later on, kind of my second career, so to speak, that I decided to go back and pursue my degree as a psychotherapist, specializing in coaching and leadership. Um, but I guess the backstory to all that is that I had always been involved in executive and leadership coaching up to that point. So my career had always been in that particular professional and personal development space. So I just was fortunate to have a lot of training, that came my way along my career path. But then I just felt like I wanted to go understand a little bit more about the psychology of how we think and function, and our emotional intelligence and all of that. And so I just went back on my own and decided to pursue that. Like I said, in my second career,
Second
my
career.
second degree. Yeah.
So you were already doing that in corporate America. Was that in like an HR type role or?
Yeah, so I had led executive and leadership development divisions for up to that point for 15 years. So I had
Nice.
always been in that space. So I've got a master's in education. And so all of this was just really a natural extension of what I was already doing. Obviously, I had a lot of training that I was receiving as an internal and through the executive conference boards and things like that. So this was just a further extension of that, of what I wanted to pursue.
Nice. Yeah, I started off in corporate training also, and you come in to talk to an executive and find out, what type of training they want for their employees. What knowledge or skills are they lacking? And I had one guy say, well, they have all the knowledge they need and their skills are pretty good. And I said, well, then why do you think you need training? And he said, they're just not consistent with the work. It's like, well, let me see your business processes. And he goes, we don't have any. And
Mhm.
that's how we got down that path. So it's interesting how that transition, once you start working with leaders, you see what they're lacking or what they're missing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, what areas do you focus on when you're working with the executives and the leaders?
Yeah. A lot of the areas that I specialize in, Harlan, is really around human relationships and communication. Those are areas, and I work with mostly, directors and senior directors and vice presidents and people in the C-suite. So, as you can imagine, particularly in very large organizations where there's a lot of complexities and ambiguities, and a lot of needing to collaborate across large departments and functions. What I find is that need for deeper understanding of how to communicate with others, and dealing with challenging, issues, and how to be able to do that effectively. So I really work with leaders on their presence, their authenticity, their willing to be vulnerable and open about the way they communicate. So again, it's very much about a conscious leadership state, so
Mhm.
that they're showing up as fully as they can because of the impact that they really do have on the numbers of people that they're touching. Does that make sense?
Nice. Absolutely. No, that's great. And so what company did you work for during that time?
Well, I worked in two global Fortune 500 firms, Wachovia Bank,
Okay.
which then was acquired. Well, they always are going through
Sure.
acquisitions, but then that was Wells Fargo, and then Assurant, which is a global risk management company. So
Very nice. And so you worked with them, you worked with their leaders and their executive team. What made you decide to go independent?
That's a question I get asked a lot and I would get called many times throughout the years that I was leading global talent management and executive coaching. People are like, "How did you get this dream job?" And it was. I've been very fortunate to have some pretty amazing roles and work with extremely talented individuals. And it was really one day that a coach that had been working with us in the organization, we happened to be having a meeting one day, and she was following me back into my office, and she said to me, "Are you doing what you love?"
Mhm.
So the power, in a question can really get people to stop and think. And so that question alone really caused me to think about, is this it? And so I'm now in my mid 40s at this point, and I realized I loved what I was doing, but I didn't think it was the end of the road for me. And so that really got me on this exploration of where do I see myself next? And within a matter of about 3 years, I was transitioning out and beginning to build my own executive coaching practice.
Very nice. And did you start C3 right away, or is that something you grew into?
Yeah, I did. So when I stepped out, I gave myself a couple of months for a bit of a sabbatical. Excuse me. And but I within 4 months, I was up and running my practice at that point. So.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Very cool. And so where did you find the courage to step out on your own? Have you always been courageous like that?
Um, no, I can't say that I was always courageous like that. I mean, if I had, somebody had said to me, "Will you do that in your 20s or 30s?" I would have said no. I wasn't courageous enough to do that. Um, it's really been an evolution for me, Harlan. I think again through the work that I've done, the self-awareness work that I do, the depth work that I do now, the practice that I have, it was all a process of getting me to that point where I just knew. It was a knowing, a very clear knowing. So I tell people it wasn't like I didn't think I would do it. It was just, when would I do it? So I knew it was coming. And so it was, just kind of waiting to see what would happen. And then literally it was like the doors blew open and it was just like boom. And even my husband looked at me one night and said, "It's clear it's time for you to go and start your practice."
Mhm.
So we really, we both knew it instantly at that time.
That's awesome. Yeah, because talking with people, they say, it's so comfortable, and really that's what it is that comfort zone where somebody else is making the decision, somebody else is taking all the risk, somebody else is handing you a paycheck every week. That's hard to walk away from, you
It really
know?
was. I mean, yes, I mean, walking away for a very large salary and the reputation, there's a lot of ego in all of that, right? Into
Sure.
recognizing what you're stepping away from, and and there's a perceived sense of safety in all of that,
Mhm.
right? There's a perceived sense of safety, and so yeah, that was it. Even though I knew it in a very intuitive and at a gut level, it was still scary. It wasn't that I wasn't, like, what's going to happen next? But I just trusted that this was the next step. And I will say this: the contingency was for me was that if it didn't work out, I could always go find another job.
Sure.
And that's something that I think a lot of times leaders forget, is that, this isn't the end of the road. And I still don't know. I've been in practice now for 5 years. I don't know that this is the end of the road. I'm not sure what's next or what's
Yeah,
around the corner, but I know that I trust that I know that there will be something else and it'll be okay.
sure. But don't you think, I mean, for some people, it's the decision to go out on their own is scary. And so that holds them back. But then on the flip side of that, if, like you said, things don't work out, I can always get another job. For some people, that's scary too, because they have to admit, I couldn't do it. I wasn't good enough, or I didn't make the right decision. That's hard too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's where, and particularly in the work that I do, I really focus on, what's your purpose? Why are you even on this planet? And I think when people know that, and I knew this for me, is that I knew that whatever I'm doing, it might be internal, it might be external, it's going to evolve over time, that I know what my purpose is. So that doesn't throw me off my game. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
but you're right. And it doesn't, and I say that too, is that it doesn't also say that it's a failure. To me, it's not about failure. It's about, I did something and I was successful at it, or I wasn't. It's like, what do I learn from that? And how do I take that and move forward?
Exactly.
Um, I just I was very certain. And again, I had a lot of signals and evidence that was saying it's time to go. And I had the support of my partner, my husband, and that's huge. I do think,
Sure.
having somebody who can support you is really valuable when you're going through a transformation.
Absolutely. So you're still working with executives and leaders.
Yes.
Have you ever had to coach any of them to take that leap?
Actually, I'm coaching about a half a dozen leaders right now that are interestingly, and I don't know how much of this is related to COVID, but are looking to make a pretty big pivot in their careers. That are
Mm,
now looking and saying, "I'm ready to do something different." So, a lawyer that wants to begin to, who wants to uh, literally start a new way of thinking of how do we get people to engage in constructive and difficult conversations over dinners, for
nice,
example. So
nice.
literally taking her skill sets of communication and negotiation and teaching others how to be in community when we talk about things, and it doesn't have to be this conflict and difficult thing. It can just
Sure.
be, let's talk about what you think and let's talk about what I think. So I'm
Wow.
finding, yeah, that many of the leaders I deal with and talk and work with are going through something like that, or who are going through a big challenge at work, that are in their current jobs too, that
Right.
find themselves at that point of, do I have courage to stand up and say what I really think here?
Right.
Right.
And so, how do you help them find that courage?
Hmm. Yeah. You're probably gonna hear me say this a lot here, Harlan, but I really think it's once when you really do know that you're doing what you're intended to be doing, there's a sense of clarity that comes with that, that gives you the courage to step up and do what you want to do. So you're no longer being controlled by or restricted rather by those old beliefs that tell you to be fearful, right?
Yeah.
And so as humans, we have a tendency to work out of a condition of safety instinct. Okay,
Mhm.
we're wired for safety, right? And so my work with leaders is to help them to find out what it is they really feel like they're here to do, and then look at what is their instant safety instinct telling them that is potentially a barrier to them to be able to go and do that. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Absolutely. And so you help them then chip away at those barriers, or chip away to get all that excess out of the way so they can actually see what they should be doing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so usually our safety instinct is really good at telling us things that we need to be protecting ourselves about. So we
Mm,
take a look at those. We'll take a look at what is it that safety instinct is telling you, and look at how is that, where has that benefited them in the past, but where is it becoming an inhibitor now? And usually that instinct is like I said, working out of an old pattern, that was that's kind of stuck around for a long time, but is no longer in service to where this person is today. So once they're clear about where they're going, it's like, well, a lot of times there's things we have to shed. It's kind of like if you move your house, out of your house, right? You
mhm.
don't take, no, I don't know anybody that takes everything with them out of their house, right? There's a
Right.
lot of shedding of old things. And that's
Sure.
exactly what we have to do with our mindset is there's things we have to shed. And I know for me personally, I had to shed this idea that that I was not going to be okay, that I wasn't going to be have all the resources that I need, and then you start to realize that your mind begins to shift and realizing that you actually have everything you need, and your mind shifts to you don't need the same things that you needed when you were living this in this other house, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. I was jotting down some notes. Tony Robbins talks about the six basic human needs that we
Mm,
all have: the need for certainty,
mhm,
the need for uncertainty or variety, significance. We need to feel significant to someone or something. Love, connection, being part of a group, growth, and then contribution, giving back. And I think in talking to some of the companies, the business leaders that I'm working with now, talking to them about those, what's most important for them, or listening to what they say, and see if you can pick up. Well, significance is very important to them. How can we
mhm,
help them get significance in a way that's more beneficial to their company or to their employees without taking anything away from them? You know what I mean?
mhm.
Do you come across things like that with your executives and your leaders?
Sure. Sure. I mean, we're all driven by some form of values,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm absolutely seeking and looking for what's most important to them. Right? What really gets them up in the morning? What if everything else was gone? What would they be motivated to be doing? So
Yeah.
absolutely, that's a real part of to me. That's a real part of knowing why you're here, and
Sure.
what you're here to accomplish. And Carl Jung, one of the top psychoanalysts, has a wonderful phrase that we walk in shoes too small for us.
Mm,
And that's something that I think is very true for a lot of leaders, is that we're not courageous enough to to live out what we think is our strengths. We work more out of that, what are our weaknesses or what are our fears, than
yeah,
what we actually can achieve. And that's actually more scary, of, oh my gosh, I really have the capacity to go and do this.
right. And so you talked about the emotional intelligence and working with the employees, engaging the employees. Is that one of the main things you work with the
Mhm.
leaders? And is that a common problem that people have, leaders have?
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that a lot of us, I know in the most recent research I read, is that, about 90% of people think that they're pretty self aware, when in truth, only about 10 to 15% of us are. So, on a regular basis. So I start with, in my work, Harlan, I start with really helping people understand the brain. So, through neuroscience, I help them understand what's going on in the brain. How does the brain function, and how is that working for us sometimes, and where is it impeding us? Okay. So I start there, and then I also then move into really getting them to develop attention training. Okay. Which is a deeper way of really being in the moment. Okay. Being present. And that's really where the ancient wisdom that I talked about, or you mentioned in my
Yeah.
introduction, is where that comes from. That's really out of the contemplative practices over centuries ago, where people would sit and be, and really learn how to separate from their thoughts. And
Mm,
most of us think that our thoughts are who we are, but most of our thoughts are things that we have been informed of through our culture, through our society, through our communities, through our families, and we don't realize that we can actually quiet the mind down. And so
nice.
uh, I really get them to realize, that mind wandering is actually causing more interruptions in getting them the clarity that they need and what they're trying to move through. So teach them how to do that attention training, and then I move into more of that emotional intelligence, because attention training is a form of emotional intelligence. The
Mm,
more that we're aware, the more that we're present, the more that we really can see what's going on around us, both within ourselves and others. And so teaching them those skills of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management.
nice. And then how do you do that? Do you teach them meditation skills? Do you teach them to journal, or what do you do?
Yeah, so really around the attention training, it's a combination of mindfulness practices. What can you do in the moment? Again, to override any of those anxious feelings. And so, even as we're sitting here talking today, and I don't normally do podcasts, but here I am talking to you, and I'm breathing. I'm noticing what's going on in my body. So a lot of it is, what am I feeling? What am I sensing? And being able to override that, again, that safety instinct that goes, run away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So teaching them how to just stay in that moment, where if you're feeling anxious, to allow that emotion to come over you and just let it move on, because in about 90 seconds it will, and you'll be back to center.
Nice.
So I teach them about that. Journaling is a great way of getting in touch with that safety instinct as well, of what is that telling you, and is that coming out of your wiser older self, or is that really coming out of that adaptive self that you really learned how to be in the world, that's not in service to you?
Hmm.
So those are a couple
Very
of
cool.
the techniques that I do.
Yeah. But tell me more about the ancient wisdom. What other things do you tap into?
Yeah. Well, again, a lot of it is about what I think about when I think about our as being our human condition. Okay, meaning, we refer to ourselves as human beings,
Mm,
but oftentimes what I find is that what people hear is that we need to be human doers. Okay,
okay.
we're in that doing state all the time, and
Right.
so we've adopted this belief that if we're not doing, we're not achieving, we're not striving, we're not conquering something, then somehow there's a deficit in our ability to just
Mm,
be okay. All right. And so to me, it's getting them to get comfortable with their human beingness. All right. And so, there's different techniques that I use to help them get in touch with that part of themselves that goes, you're enough, and a lot of times, I mean, a lot of times what I find the leaders I work with is they struggle with realizing that they're enough. And I tell them a simple thing I tell a lot of my leaders is you've already got the A.
Yeah.
You're sitting as a senior vice president in an organization, for goodness sake, you're making, $600,000, $800,000 a year,
Mhm.
you're living this dream life, but it doesn't seem enough to you because you're still striving because you're believing that there's more you have to be doing. And so,
Mhm.
sometimes just saying something like that of you've got the A is
Yeah.
enough for them to realize, oh wow, really? I can give myself that permission.
Sure.
So yeah, so a lot of this is about the messaging and helping them to get in touch with that being part of themselves.
And a lot of that is the baggage we carry with us, right? It's the things that either we heard from family growing up or maybe a previous boss that said, you'll never be good enough for this. We believe that,
Yeah.
right? At a certain point in our lives, we decided we would believe that and we carry that with us everywhere. That's hard to let go of.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I find that once a leader is introduced to and really sees that for themselves of what's been driving them all along and how that really is holding them back from living more purposefully. It's not to say that they're then free of any of that stress or anxiety. It's still there, but you're able to push through it so much more easily,
Yeah.
because you're just not willing to allow that to drive your life.
Yeah. Just becoming aware of it, I guess, is enough. Working with my clients, making them aware of some of the financial decisions or financial things they've done in their business, just drawing attention to it and putting a spotlight on it corrects that issue. It brings it front of mind. So,
Right. I say awareness is about 80% of the work. I really do. It's just being able to know it, and then being able to see it and not react, because we work out of those old habitual patterns that keep us stuck in that. So once we catch it, it's like, oh, there it is, right there. I'm doing that thing again that I used to do that is not in service. I can just take a breath and I can move on.
nice. So you get them more aware of themselves. Um, then how do you get them to connect with their employees more? Because that employee engagement is tough. That's one of the things that's been in the news for years now. That employees don't feel that they're listened to. They don't feel like they're seen or heard in the business. So how do you help these leaders and executives engage their employees more?
Yeah. That's a really good point, and that is a real absence still in a lot of organizations is the ability to have compassionate leadership. And so I help. Part of emotional intelligence is having the ability to recognize where someone else is coming from, right, and to be able to empathize with them, which doesn't mean you let them off the hook.
Yeah,
Okay, I tell a lot of my leaders, have a strong back and an open heart. You know,
nice.
you hold people accountable, but you care passionately about them as an individual.
Hmm.
And the accountability is knowing what they can achieve and just being there to help them achieve that. But caring deeply about who they are as the person. That
Exactly.
they are a human being, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. No, exactly. And that's part of the empathetic courage. Um, that yeah, you want to see them as a human, understand the issues that they're going through, the struggles they're going through, and connect with them at that level. But as a leader, you have to reinsert yourself as the leader to say, I understand this is going on and I feel for you, but
yeah.
I need you to step up. I need you to do X or I need you to complete Y. You can't let that empathy take over to where you make decisions based on their struggles because you could be impacting the other employees or the business itself.
Yep, that's exactly right. And there's always, to me, when leaders get that, Harlan, they find solutions. If that leader is really struggling with something, then it's like, well, what can we do? What's the support you need, to help you with whatever is getting in your way? But we don't just give in, right? It's not about
Right.
that. Accountability is extremely important in business, and so I find leaders that are hold their teams to high standards, but care, deeply about their employees, get so much more discretionary effort
Mhm.
than somebody that either does give in, or somebody that is a big jerk, you know.
Exactly. And I love the term discretionary effort. We hear people talk about having discretionary income.
Mhm.
You can go to Vegas and gamble X amount of money that you've set aside specifically for that. Employees have discretionary effort that they can either choose to give to the business or keep from the business. And by connecting with them, you allow them to bring that extra effort that they have, the knowledge they have from a previous employer, skills that maybe they aren't currently using that they could bring in to bear at the company.
That's
Having that
I
engagement with them.
Yeah, and I find that leaders that will go and do their, work on their own, what I call it, their own inner landscape, and
Mhm.
really figure out what are those reactive, behaviors that are getting in their way, uh, are much more effective at getting discretionary people. People want to follow leaders
Yeah,
that have that,
sure.
much more so than leaders that don't. So,
Absolutely. So, in working with the leaders and the executives in the C-suite, what type of courage do you think is most important for them?
mm, yeah. Um, Pause. Okay, I'm ready.
Go.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, So I would say intellectual courage is probably one of the ones that stands out to me, Harlan, because it's, what C-suite leaders deal with on a day-to-day basis is they are getting bombarded with tons of information, right? They're having to hear and sift through and make decisions very rapidly. And what I find is that what can happen is that we fall back, or they fall back into behaviors of relying on old assumptions, beliefs, or even their own experiences to say, well, this wouldn't work, right? We've tried this before, this wouldn't work. And so I think that intellectual courage of being willing to let go of some of those old beliefs and attitudes, and really, use the power of inquiry to ask questions about, why is this person thinking this is a good idea? How might that be implemented? Versus just trying to rush on and go off of some old bias that they've been holding on to. So I would say intellectual is probably one of the bigger ones
Yeah.
that I find leaders struggling with and needing
Yeah.
them stuff.
I think so too. I've always been uh, a learner, right? A lifelong learner. I have a Kindle that's bulging at the seams with books. I'm constantly reading because there's always new information coming out. And I think you're right. Some leaders get locked into, well, this is the way I've always done it. This is the way I was taught. This is what I've seen work before. And they either shrug off or ignore, these different ideas that are coming from even their employees. And sometimes the employees who are down there actually doing the work
Mhm.
see things that could be improved. And I think that's one thing leaders have to be able to do is set aside what they know, what they think, and listen to the employee. They may come up with an idea that nobody's thought of before, you know?
I completely agree. And again, our natural, again, this is where the neuroscience can be so helpful when I'm working with leaders, is helping them understand how that's how the mind is trained to do that, right? Of sift through, because we can only hold so much new information in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And so we're constantly trying to push things off and move on, because it takes up so much energy, and it actually can get almost like hot, like a computer or something. And
Right.
so it's an easy thing. And that's why, again, the attention training is so powerful, because once a leader knows how to stay present and really hear what's going on right here, right now, they can then make choices about how to listen more attentively and really engage with new content, realizing I don't have to stay here the whole time, but it's important I do engage in this conversation and not miss it.
Nice.
A lot of C-suite leaders are missing too much because they think they have the answer, or they're in a rush to move on to the next thing, and are missing, probably some really great opportunities for their
Sure.
business.
So as they're listening to somebody coming up with a new idea, if they start to put up some resistance, some barriers,
Mhm.
you're teaching them to say, stop for a second, understand what that is, why is that there, and push that aside, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Make room.
exactly, exactly. So you're again, this is where the awareness really comes in of, and really the whole definition of mindfulness is being able to pay attention to what's going on right here, right now, both in my body, what's going on externally with these other people and in this environment. So you're very attuned. I teach leaders how to be very attuned to what's going on in the moment. Okay.
Nice.
And it's a skill. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, this is for, monks and things like that. And although a lot of, again, this comes out of a lot of spiritual practices, the reality is this is a skill. And we know through the research that people can learn this skill in about 8 weeks.
Mhm.
Now it's something you have to keep going with, but the capacity of our minds to really be able to just stay right here is hugely beneficial. And so it's learning how to just notice. And I say, become a witness of yourself, become a witness of what's going on, and be an observer of all of this that's happening. Don't get so caught up in the content that you're missing what's going on, because there's so much, that can inform you about what to do and with what you're doing.
Interesting. Yeah, you talk about that now. I went to high school with a friend of mine, Scott, that whenever we would ask, "Hey, do you want to do X or Y?" He would pause for a second. Every once in a while, he kind of close his eyes, and he'd come back and goes, "No." And he was comfortable in his decision. There was no swaying him one way or another. If he said no, it meant no, and that was it.
Mhm.
Because he was thinking, am I feeling any, I don't know, conflict
Mhm.
about that decision? And if there's no conflict, that's what he does. If there is conflict, then he knows, you know, not to go that way. So interesting. And you can teach that in 8 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the research is showing that. I mean, learning the skills now, again, it's a practice.
It takes practice, sure.
I've been doing it for, over a decade now. And it does get easier, but I mean, particularly at first, the beginning
Yeah.
few weeks can be really tough. It's kind of like if you went on a no sugar diet and,
Mhm.
you've never done that, that can be really tough. Right. And
Sure.
it can feel hard, but once you start to glean the benefits from it, it's the clarity it's worth the training. Let me just say
Yeah.
that.
Nice. Now, do
Benefits.
you do this mainly one-to-one with your coaching clients, or do you group coaching, or both?
I've done them both internally. Most recently, I did a leadership program, and we did a couple of things. It was a 3-day leadership program. This was pre-COVID, right? So we were in person, and we started each of our sessions with a 60 seconds of silence. So we called it, yeah, just a 60-second silence. And it was amazing. At first, I was scared to death to have tried this because I didn't know what kind of reaction we would get. But afterwards, I'd ask them, what was that like to just have that 60-second pause? And the reactions were like, oh my gosh, I so needed this. I so needed this moment because we move so fast. We've conditioned ourselves to think that speed is the only thing
Mhm.
that we need to be doing. So we did that. And so we would then take and train them even further on how to just keep practicing this, whether if you're coaching your employee, taking a moment and just pausing before you start, and thinking about what's most important. So a lot of it is getting them to think about, how do I prepare for this meeting? What's my role in this meeting? And being intentional. So we talked a lot about intentionality and
Yeah.
how to show up intentionally for meetings so that you're having the most impact for the people you're engaging with.
Nice. Very cool. So intellectual courage. Do you think that's easy for leaders?
I don't know many that find it easy. No, Harlan. I think it's hard because again, we're wired to be able to ascertain what's needed and what's not, right? So our mind is actually working towards figuring out what to pay attention to or not, and about 4 times a second or so, I think the research says that we're assessing for threats.
Mhm.
So we're constantly sifting that out. The good news, though, is that through neuroscience, we have learned how much plasticity the mind has, and how through practicing attention training, we actually start to build up more gray matter in the brain, which gives us the ability to do more of this.
Nice.
So it is a practice. It is not an easy one, uh, but I find that the leaders that have this practice do have much success from it, and they realize, it will always be a practice. I think that's what people are looking for, though. They're thinking it's going to be like, you're going to do this and then you've got it and then you never have to practice again. But we know that's like with anything we do, you have to keep doing it to be good
Absolutely.
at it, right? So you just keep
Absolutely.
practicing, in other words, and then it becomes one of those things that now it just becomes a part of who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so how about for you? Is there a type of courage that comes easiest for you?
Um, Yeah, I was thinking on this earlier, and and again, so much of what we've been talking about is what reminds me of what the easiest one for me is, because it comes out of my upbringing, and I would say disciplined courage. I grew up with a father who had been in the military, and so very kind of strict and structured, upbringing, and so for me, it's what's easy about being disciplined is that I can be very focused. I now know why I'm here and what I'm here to do and how I use my skill sets to help others. And so in knowing that, it's very easy for me to stay focused and disciplined on what I need to do.
Nice. Is there a type of courage that is a little more difficult for you?
It's funny. My husband, if he was here, and he has said this to me many times, we've been together over 20 years now, and he would tell you I'm the most courageous person he knows. So now I don't do like crazy, stunts and things like that. I don't have any courage to go and do that. So I guess that's an area that I wouldn't feel comfortable about. But I am willing to do the hard work, and that's really what he sees. Whether it's emotionally being able to go through the process of kind of cleaning out old attitudes and beliefs and
Yeah.
things that were no longer serving me, or whether it's the courage to do something that is really scary, like launching out and starting your own
Yeah.
business, or talking to somebody that you don't know anything about their business, and putting myself in a position where I might be working with somebody that is an executive vice president that has many, degrees and titles, and being willing to put myself out there as a capable person who could coach them. That takes a lot of courage.
It does.
But I think about the fact that, being courageous is really just about the act of moving forward and doing something that doesn't feel comfortable, right?
Exactly.
So I think I do that in many different ways, but don't ask me to jump from an airplane. I'm not interested in
Yeah.
that.
But you're right. Courage really is the action,
Yeah,
because you can have, we talk about the emotional courage or empathetic courage, social courage, being able to say what needs to be said without, fear of the ramifications, moral courage, standing up for what's right, even if it's unpopular. There are a lot of people that think morally or think that social, but they won't act.
right. Mhm.
And I almost see, so if courage is the action, then inaction would be the opposite of courage.
Mhm.
I almost see that as cowardice. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah. I think along the same lines that that it's not that something is getting in their way, right? So I would say it can be cowardly, but again, I'm always looking for, well, what is getting in their way of feeling like they can't move forward, and how to help them get unstuck, basically, so that they do have the courage. And I really think we all have the capacity to do that. It does take the willingness to, like I said, sift through things and be willing to get uncomfortable with
Sure.
some of those things. And so that's where I find some people are just not, wanting to do that. That doesn't make them ineffective. I just don't think they are as effective as they could be if they're
Yeah,
willing to look at some of that so that they can push through that. It's like it's
exactly.
probably things that we've all been in situations where we could have spoken up and said something and didn't, right?
Yeah,
And that's a way of realizing, ooh, what got in my way right then? I
right.
felt that, right? There was a conviction I felt, but what inhibited me from actually speaking what I thought was truth?
Sure. Yeah. So what would that action have cost? Right.
Yeah.
What would be the cost, or what would you have to give up, or if it's being uncomfortable, if it's being looked at a little differently, you know. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I like that.
Okay.
Good stuff. Um, so if you could go back to when you were first starting off and deciding to get the degree to go in deeper, to learn more about psychology and the emotional intelligence, everything like that. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would that advice be?
um, it would be to to trust that it's going to all be well, that really that if you do know that this is where you feel like you need to be, then you trust it, and realize too that your mind will shift. My mind has shifted, and that was a big awareness for me, Harlan, was, and I wish I had known this then, and I wish somebody had told me this, that my mind actually shifts to realizing that what I thought I needed, or what my perceived views were about how I needed to, where I needed to live, how I needed to be, really, your mind begins to just move in this whole new direction around supporting you around what you are intended, you designed to be doing. And so knowing that now, there's just this sense of, peace and contentment of, yeah, I don't need I don't need the same things that I needed before. And I'm not without. That's the thing, we've never gone without ever since I left my corporate job. So there's this sense of perceived safety, but it doesn't exist. I mean, inside a business, it really doesn't exist. But I wish I had had a better sense of how my mind would have shifted, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Good stuff. So what's next for you? What's
Yeah.
next?
So, what is next for me on my business? Well, I'm noticing that a lot of my more recent clients are looking and doing similar things that I did, right? Of
Nice.
stepping out and trying and figuring out what their next step would be. So I'm noticing that that seems to be a place that I'm spending a lot of my time right now, is helping leaders that are looking to be more conscious and courageous leaders. And so I've been doing a lot of research around that, meaning studying CEOs that are really leading that way. So, for example, Jeff Weiner, the past CEO of LinkedIn, is a good example of somebody who leads compassionately and consciously. John Mackey, the CEO and founder of Whole Food Markets, is another one. I mean, and so I'm really digging in around how to help other leaders take on these qualities so that we are elevating humanity through business. That's really what I feel is my ambition now, is to elevate, to work with organizations that are no longer satisfied with how we used to lead, and uh, how we were satisfied with just the status quo, but really taking on the ability to lead at a much higher level. And so I'm doing a lot of that. I'm planning to launch some training around this, some public training around conscious leadership later this year. So I'm working on that too, and framing up a lot of what you and I were just talking about today, and how I would help other leaders do just that.
Excellent. And so if leaders want to get in touch with you, how can they do that? What's your website?
Yeah, it's the C3group.us, all one word. The C is in cat, the number three, and then group. The C3group.us.
.us. Perfect. That is awesome. And I will have all that available in the show notes. As far as the trading, the psychology, and the learning to be quiet and to listen, are there any books that you recommend?
Yeah, so two books come to mind, Harlan. One is The Leadership Presence by our Conscious Leadership. I'm sorry, Conscious Leadership by John Mackey. He just came out with that last fall, I believe.
Okay.
I think that has a lot of good examples. I love to use CEOs who are doing this work and have been doing it for quite some time. So I'd say that one is one. The Mindfulness Edge is another one. And I think Tenney is the author's last name. I can't remember his first name.
Okay.
He gets into a lot of the science of attention training, but that would be another one as well.
Nice. That is awesome. Well, I will make those titles available in the show notes so people can go and look at those. Marcel, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest. This has been awesome. And I would love to check in with you later on after you've conquered the world and more CEOs and help them on their quest. And we'll definitely check in. But thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Harlan. I enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. Wow. Awesome. And listeners, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you share this with your family, friends, and colleagues. Any executives or leaders, CEOs, C-level executives that are struggling, have them go to the c3group.us website and check out Marcel. All right. Thanks very much, Marcel. And folks, that's it for me, Coach Harlan, saying so long for now.